Okay, so the first step I'm going to take is to pin my hair back so that I don't get it all messy. I do like to use these sectioning clips rather than a headband or a ponytail or something. I feel like they don't crease my hair as badly, and then when I'm done I can just pull them right out and be ready to go. So I'm just going to section it to where I can see my face. And then we're gonna get started. So my next step is to moisturize. My favorite moisturizer to use is the Neutrogena Hydro Boost Water Gel with hyaluronic acid. So I'm going to just get a little bit on my finger. I really don't need much. And then I'm just gonna put little, just like dabs all over my face. I'm just gonna rub it in. Okay, so you don't want so much that your face is slick. You want just enough so that it's kind of tacky by the time you're done rubbing it in. That way it gives something for your primer and then foundation to grip onto. So the next step is primer. And I use the Smashbox Photo Finish, just original formula. I'm going to take some of the primer and I'm actually just gonna put like a pea-size amount on the back of my hand. So I've got about that much. And then I'm going to add a few drops of Cover FX Custom Enhancer drops. It looks like this. I don't know what shade this is. Celestial. All right, so it's the Celestial shade. And I'm just going to put a drop or two into my primer. And this is just a really pretty, I don't even know what you'd call it. It's just got a really pretty sheen to it. You can also use it as a highlighter, but I like to put it with my primer so that way I have a nice glowy base before I even get started with my foundation. So I'm just going to apply that all over my face using my fingers. And I really want to concentrate that primer in my T-zone, so where you have the most like redness and pores. So I'm gonna put it kind of right under my eyes here, on your chin, and between your eyebrows, kind of up onto your forehead, and then also on your nose. You do want to smooth it everywhere, but you really want to make sure you get it on those areas. This will just even out your skin if you have any texture, and it provides a base for your foundation. All right, so next I do recommend applying a lip balm, or what I like to use actually is Aquaphor, and I'm gonna put this on my lips. That way my lips will be nice and moisturized by the time I'm done with my face makeup, and that way when I go to apply lip liner and lipstick, they will be nice and soft rather than chapped. All right, so next up, I'm going to use the Becca Under Eye Brightening Corrector. So this is not concealer, it is a corrector, which means that if you have really dark circles under your eyes, it's going to help to correct that before you even do put on concealer. That way you don't have to put so much that it ends up caking up. So I'm just going to put some of that on my finger, and I'm just going to dab it underneath my eyes, mostly concentrating on kind of like the inner corner here. And I don't want too much of this. It's not supposed to completely cover everything up because we will be going back over it with concealer. I also will put a little bit, for me, I get kind of darkness right here on the inner corner of my eye. So I'll put a little bit there as well. My next step is foundation, and I have a few here to show you. One of my favorite CC creams is the IT CC cream with the illumination. This is a great foundation for those of you that just don't want that super heavy makeup look. It is, I'd say, it says it's a full coverage, but I'd probably say it's more of a medium coverage. It's also going to leave your skin a lot more glowy. It does not dry matte. It stays pretty creamy on your skin. But my favorite one, and the one that I'm actually going to use today, is the Estee Lauder Double Wear foundation. I use the shade Ivory Nude, and this is a super full coverage foundation, it dries matte. I will still set it with powder, which I'll show you in a little bit, but this is for those of you that you don't want to see your skin at all. You want it to be completely covered up. You want a flawless finish. So I'm going to take some of this and just put it on the back of my hand. All right, and then to apply the foundation, I'm going to use a damp beauty sponge. I use the Real Techniques, and I'll actually use two throughout this video. One I use for my liquid, so my foundation, concealer, sometimes I'll use it for primer, and then this is the one that I'll use for powders, which I'll show you later. So I'm just going to take that foundation onto my sponge. Right, and then with the foundation and the beauty sponge, you're going to press it into your skin. You don't want to smear, you don't want to, rub at it, because then it's not going to actually go on well. So I'm just going to start pressing all over my face. Okay, so now that my foundation is done, I'm going to move on to concealer. My favorite concealer to use is the Tarte Shape Tape Concealer. I use the shade Fair Neutral, and my tip for concealer is to choose one that is a shade or two lighter than your natural skin tone. If you're pale like me, that's going to be hard to find, so just do your best, but if you are able to, get a shade that is lighter than the rest of your skin. So I'm going to take a little bit on my brush. I don't want, or the applicator, not the brush, I guess. I don't want too much because it can end up looking cakey, so I'm going to start with a little bit, and then if I need to build onto it, I can. So I'm just going to put that right underneath my eyes. And then same on the other side. Right, and then with the same damp sponge that I was applying my foundation with, I'm just going to start blending that in. So I'm just going to press just like I did with my foundation. And if you notice, I'm not just putting it right under my eye, I'm kind of making like a little triangle with this. This will brighten up your under eye area and add dimension to your face. All right, and then the same thing with the other side. Right, and then I'm also going to add the concealer to my eyelids to cover up any redness, obviously, any veins that you might have on your eyelids, and also to provide a base for the eyeshadow that you will be applying later. Okay, so you immediately want to set your under eye. The concealer will get really cakey, especially in the lines when you smile or look around or anything. So I'm going to use the, not the same one that I use for foundation and concealer, but the damp sponge that I use for powders. And my favorite powder to use for under my eyes is actually the Becca Under Eye Brightening Powder. But I'm all out, so instead I'm going to be using the Fenty Beauty Lavender Pro Filter Powder. So just like with concealer under your eyes, you want to use a powder that is going to brighten up that area. So this is a very bright powder, and I am going to take my sponge and just dip it straight into that powder. Now, that is going to put a whole lot onto my sponge, and if I were to put this under my eyes, it would dry it out tremendously, and then I would end up with little spots where it would start getting flaky. So instead, I'm going to take a little fluffy brush, and I'm actually just going to kind of knock off some of that powder, and it's also going to even it out to make sure that there aren't spots where there is more than other spots. So then before I set, because I've been looking at the camera and looking around, I'm actually going to make sure that I press in that concealer one last time. That way those wrinkles are nice and filled in. And then when I put on the powder, I'm going to be looking up the entire time. So I'm just going to press that powder underneath my eye. I want to go back and forth to make sure that I get the concealer set kind of from all angles. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other eye. So I'm going to put some powder onto my sponge. Going to brush off the excess. I'm going to make sure that concealer is nice and blended in. And then I'm going to press the powdered sponge straight under my eye, looking up the whole time. I'm going to take the same fluffy brush. This is from the Morphe Jaclyn Hill collection. Any brush you see with the white handle during this video is from the same collection. So this is just, it's like a tapered powder brush. And I'm just going to kind of pat over where I put that powder to make sure that there isn't too much, and just to make sure that it's really blended in. All right, so then I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I don't have to be as careful. And I'm just going to make sure that my eyelid concealer is blended in, and then I'm just going to use the same brush with more powder to set that. Okay, so my next step is to set the rest of my face, and I have two powders that I actually use together to set my face, and they are the Laura Mercier Translucent Loose Setting Powder and the Jaclyn Luminous Powder in the shade Do Me. So I like to mix both of these together. This is just a regular old setting powder, and this one has a nice sheen to it, so it's really good at hiding imperfections, texture, dryness, kind of anything you want. I will say though that if you're looking for more of an affordable drugstore foundation, I really like the Coty Airspun Loose Face Powder. It looks like this. You can get it at Walmart or I think some CVS's. So that is another option if you want something a little bit more affordable. So I'm going to take the Jaclyn powder and I'm going to just put it straight into the cap. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but I'm just going to kind of show you. So this is the powder, and if I kind of put some onto my hand, I don't know if you'll be able to tell in the video, but it's just got a nice, just a nice little sheen to it. It's not shimmery, but it is very good at, like I said, hiding imperfections. And then same thing with the Laura Mercier powder. I'm going to put it in its own cap. So I've got those two powders, and then I'm going to be using, let's see, what do I want to use? I'm going to start with this brush here. It's just kind of an angled powder brush. This has really loose bristles. It's not very dense, so it's going to have a very soft application. For some reason on my nose, when I apply powders with a dense brush, it wipes the foundation completely off. It doesn't do it anywhere else on my face, just my nose. So I am going to start there with the looser brush to make sure that it does not do that. So I have my two powders here. I'm going to take some of the Laura Mercier and some of the Jaclyn. So I've got some on my brush, actually quite a bit on my brush. And then I'm just going to very lightly dust that on my nose. To set it first. A little bit more, just to make sure it's nice and set. I do not want that foundation going anywhere, especially when we start contouring later. Okay, and then I'm going to do the rest of my T-zone. So I'm going to put my chin, and onto my forehead. And then I'm gonna put some onto the tops of my cheekbones. And then whatever's just left of the Laura Mercier, I'm just going to put a little bit on kind of the outer edges of my face. You really want to make sure anywhere that you have like lines when you smile or raise your eyebrows or anything else, you want to make sure you get those nice and set so that the foundation doesn't kind of slide into those wrinkles throughout the day. Alrighty, so I am going to keep the Laura Mercier powder out because I'm going to use it for baking, which I'll show you later on. It's part of the contour process, and that is actually what I'm going to go ahead and get started with. So my favorite bronzer to use for contouring is the Hoola Benefit bronzer. I'm going to start with it's kind of a dense rounded brush, and I'm going to get a little bit of the bronzer onto that brush, and then I want to make sure I tap off the excess. You do not want a ton of the powder on the brush, because then when you go to put it on for contouring, you're just going to have a big old like brown splotch, and then when you try to blend it out, it'll end up looking really muddy. So you want to make sure that you start with a very little bit, and then you can add to it if you need more. I'm just gonna here the excess, and then I'm going to be contouring kind of around my forehead, and it's going to end up kind of wrapping into my cheek contour, and then I'm also going to be contouring my jawline and my nose a little bit. So you want to take that bronzer, and you don't want it to be in the center of your face. You want to keep the center of your face pretty bright. You're just trying to add some dimension kind of to the outer edges. It's gonna grab all my baby hairs because it always does. That's okay, I can fix them later. And I'm just going to start gently tapping this bronzer onto my forehead. Again, you don't want to just rub it, because then you're just gonna rub off all your foundation. So you just want to kind of tap it on to blend it. You're just keeping it in the outer kind of edge of your forehead, and you're also not bringing it down all the way yet. You're gonna stop about at your, I guess, like where the tail of your eyebrow would be. Okay, so now hopefully you notice you've got kind of a nice shadow kind of going around your forehead, but the spot right in the middle is still nice and bright. So now I'm actually going to take a different brush, and I'll show you two options. There is a brush in the Morphe Jaclyn collection, and it's very flat, and it's actually much smaller than the other brush I used. And so this is very good for when you're trying to contour more precisely. So like when you're trying to carve out your cheekbones. And then there's also this brush, and it's also by Morphe, and you can get it just at Ulta. And this is the M459, and this is very kind of skinny and flat and dense, so that you can almost stamp on the bronzer into a straight line. So whichever you would prefer to use, you can do it either way. So I will actually show you how to use this one and this one. So I'm going to start with just putting some of the bronzer onto this brush. And I'm really going to make sure I'm tapping off the excess, because especially with a dense brush, it's going to pick up way more product than a less dense brush. So I'm going to make sure that I don't have too much on there, because again, if I put down too much product, it's going to be really hard to blend it out later on. I can always get more if I need to. So when you are contouring your cheekbones, what you want to do is start where kind of the top of your ear would be, and you're going to be going down kind of toward the corner of your mouth. That is where you want to apply the bronzer. So I am going to just kind of start stamping this on. So you see I'm starting to get a little bit of product there. And I do not want to go any further down than about there. I also don't want to bring it all the way to the corner of my mouth, because no one's cheekbone comes all the way down to here. You're gonna bring it right to where, about where your cheekbone's gonna kind of start curving up, and then you're going to stop. So then I'm going to take this brush here, and I'm gonna apply a little bit of the bronzer just on kind of the edge of the brush, not on the whole thing. And make sure I've gotten rid of the excess. And then I'm going to take that brush And right where I started to create that line, I kind of mapped it out for me. That way when I'm blending, I don't have to worry about going down too far or too high or not knowing where to put it. And I'm just going to right where that line is, not over it because you don't want to bring it down too far, but right where that line starts, you're going to kind of put the edge of your brush there, and you're just going to start blending out that contour. So you can see how it's starting to kind of bring it up a little bit higher. And this is where I'm starting to kind of bring it up, so as if it were coming around to connect to my forehead. I'm not literally going to connect it, but that's kind of the goal, is to make it kind of swoop in where your cheekbones would be. So if you notice, I have more coming up here than I do right here. The line's going to kind of taper inward as we get closer to the corner of our mouth. Okay, so when I am happy with this side, I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. So I'm going to get the flat brush. Make sure I don't have much product on there. And then I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm just going to kind of stamp out the line that I'm going to add powder or bronzer, contour, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to start at the top where my ear would be, and I'm going to go right along this line where my mouth would be. All right, and then I'm going to take my flat rounder brush, put it just on the edge. Tap off all the excess. I'm always nervous I'm gonna have too much. And then I'm going to start just kind of blending that out the same as I did before. And if you notice, for this one, I'm not just patting, I am actually kind of blending almost in like little tiny circular motions. Just make sure that while you're doing this, you are not pressing very hard. You want it to be very light, that way you're not wiping off your foundation. Okay, so now I'm going to take a much smaller brush. This is actually an eyeshadow brush, but I use it as like a nose bronzing contouring brush. So it's kind of flat and it's nice and fluffy, but very small, so I can be more precise. And I'm going to take some product. Again, not much at all. You don't want it to look crazy coming out the gate. Okay, and I'm actually going to apply a little bit just to the center of right underneath my bottom lip. This just adds a little bit of dimension to your face, and it also can make your bottom lip look a little bit bigger, which clearly I need. But I'm gonna just put that right here. I don't want to bring it out too far. I'm going to just keep it right under. So you really shouldn't even notice it whenever you're looking at your makeup. And then you're going to take the same brush, put some more bronzer on. And this step is optional. I like to add some bronzer to my nose, even if I'm not contouring necessarily. It just adds some warmth to the center of your face since the rest of it's so bright. So again, I'm really gonna make sure that I get the excess off of the brush. I don't want too much. And then I'm going to just be applying a little bit just straight up and down the bridge of my nose. I don't want it to go too far down, otherwise it'll make your nose look bigger. But you also want to leave kind of a strip without bronzer straight up the center of your nose. So I'm just going to gently start applying that down the, and I'm going to get a little bit more product and do the same thing with the other side. So hopefully that doesn't look darker on camera than it does in person. Sometimes the camera does that. But now I'm going to take that Laura Mercier powder from earlier, and I'm going to use another flat dense brush, and I'm going to be packing a lot of that powder onto this brush. I'm going to barely tap off just any extra that would fall on my face when I was trying to press it in. And then right down the sides of my nose, right where that contour kind of ended, I'm just going to stamp this down in a straight line. And this is just going to clean up that bronzer. So I'm just going to do just like that on both sides. Okay, so I did it on both sides, and you want to make sure that it's kind of even along. You don't want this side to be all the way out here and then this side to be farther onto the top of your nose. And then we're just gonna let that sit, and that is called baking. When you put a lot of powder on top of your makeup and you just let it sit there, it will brighten up whatever area you leave the powder on, and it'll also clean it up. So for example, on my eyeshadow video, you'll see that I kind of stamp it underneath my eyes to make sure that the makeup's kind of cleaned up there. And then we're also going to take this and do the same thing right under that cheek contour line that we made before. So I'm going to take quite a bit on my brush, and I'm just going to stamp that in a straight line going all the way up to my ear. And this time I actually am going to bring it all the way to the corner of my mouth. So I'm going to just make sure I have a nice straight line. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. All right, if you do not have a brush like this, then you can also use just a beauty sponge. Usually they have a flat, or some of them, I should say, have kind of a flat edge. And you can kind of do the same thing with that. So you would just dip your sponge straight into that powder. Again, you want to make sure you have quite a bit on there. And then you would just take it, and the same idea, you would just create a line. Underneath your contour. So just like that. And same with the other side. So I will let that sit while I finish up the rest of my face makeup. Sometimes I'll even let it sit while I do my eyes. It just depends on the day, it depends on how much time I have. So my next step, while I have this powder on baking, I'm going to go ahead and apply blush. So one of my favorite blushes to use is NARS. This is a higher end brand. My favorite color is Deep Throat. It's just a nice pink shade, which you can barely see because I'm running out. That's how much I use it. But I wanted to give you guys another kind of drugstore option, and that is Milani. Milani has a lot of really pretty baked blushes. So they have kind of a nice sheen to them as well. It's not really a shimmer, like it's not glittery, but they just, again, just provide kind of that perfecting effect to your skin. So my favorites by Milani are Luminoso, which is more of a kind of coral peachy shade. And then what I'm going to use today is called Dolce Pink. And so it's just more of a pink shade. So I am going to just take an angled blush brush, nothing fancy. This one's by Sigma. Yeah, Sigma. And it's F40, I think. And so I'm just gonna take some of that blush onto my brush. And with blush, I actually apply kind of a lot. Blush is gonna be the first thing to fade throughout the day in your makeup. So I'm gonna take the blush and I'm gonna start, eventually I'm gonna put some kind of on the apples of my cheeks, and you want to kind of go up with your cheekbone, almost in like a little check motion. But first I'm going to put the kind of the most of it straight right here, kind of in the middle, not on that powder line of course, but just kind of right above it. You want to be right above where that contour is. So I'm just gonna kind of start applying that back and forth. I'm gonna bring it just about to about here. I'm not gonna bring it into my hairline. I'm gonna put it just right about here. And then I will start bringing it kind of onto the apple of my cheek. So you can kind of see already it's giving me like a nice little sheen right where I'm gonna put some highlighter in a minute. I'm gonna do the same thing to the other side. Joy of makeup, powder gets everywhere. I'm gonna add a little bit more, like I said. But again, just a little bit at a time. A little goes a long way, and you can always build, but it's hard to take it off once you already have it on. Okay, so now I am going to highlight, which is my favorite part. I have several highlighters to show you. I love them all, and it's really hard to choose which one to wear, so I'm just going to show you all of them. So right now I have primarily been using the Jaclyn highlighter products. So that Jaclyn powder that I showed you before, this is part of the highlighter collection. So this is just a palette with different shades of highlighters. This is the Flash palette. I think there are two, and this is the lighter shade. Let's see if I can get it open. So it looks like this. It's got different shades you can use, and obviously this is my favorite. So you can use this one here. Another one that I really like is the Ofra Glazed Donut Highlighter. It's in collaboration with Nikkie Tutorials, so it looks like this. This one is very, very bright, and it's very light. It doesn't really have much of an undertone, maybe like pearly or kind of like a, yeah, I'd say it's kind of pearly. And then I also really like the Fenty Beauty Killawatt Highlighter Duo in the shades Lightning Dust and Fire Crystal. So it looks like this, and this is the shade, that I use the most often, obviously. So today, I think that I'm gonna use these two together. I'm gonna mix the, let's see, it's Fire Crystal and Glazed Donut. I'm going to apply it using a highlighter brush. This is by Morphe, it's the M501. So I'm just going to dip my brush into both of those highlighters. And I'm gonna tap off the excess because I don't want it to look splotchy. Sometimes if you put highlighter on and you don't tap off the excess, it'll just kind of have like a big chunk of gleaming highlight, and it just doesn't look very natural. Not that highlight does often look natural, but you want to glow. You don't want it to just look like you just striped on highlighter to your face. So I'm gonna kind of smile, and where the light is kind of naturally hitting, that's where I'm just gonna apply this highlighter just to make it a little bit more prominent. So I'm gonna apply that using just circular motions, and I'm gonna kind of go all the way up to where it would kind of wrap around up to like the tail of my eyebrow. And I personally like to bring it around to the front of my cheek so that when I smile, it's nice and shiny. If you don't like that look, then you can just kind of stop it right here and just do the little kind of backward C right here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to mix those highlighters, tap off the excess, and then same thing as on this side. I am also going to be applying highlighter to my brow bone, the inner corner of my eye, and the very tip of my nose. And for this, I don't want to use the big highlighter brush because it obviously would be hard to get into those areas. So I'm going to use this more precise brush, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to dip the brush into both of those highlighters, tap off the excess, but with this it doesn't matter as much because you really are going to want a lot of pigment right onto those areas. And then I'm just going to start right under my brow bone, and I'm just going to bring that back and forth, keeping it nice and tight to my brow bone, or to my eyebrow I should say. And I am going to use my finger just to kind of blend that out. I want most of the pigment to be right up to my eyebrow. I'm going to do the same thing with the other brow. And then I'm going to add some to the tip of my nose. So I'm going to, again, just get a little bit of that highlighter. And I don't want to just smear all over the front of my nose. I want it to be very precise and just write a little dot right in the center. So I'm just going to lightly put on some highlighter, and then I'm going to kind of blend it. I don't want it to just sit there on my nose, if you can see. So I'm kind of going to blend it out just a little bit. Using my finger. So now it's just more natural looking. So now I'm going to wipe off the baking powder from the sides of my nose. And I'm going to use that same brush to apply the highlighter to the inner corner of my eye. I'm going to kind of bring it onto my eyelid, and then right underneath it just a little bit. And if you can see, it just really opens up your eye. It makes you look nice and awake, and As I've said before, you just really want to keep this area nice and bright. So this helps with that. Right, and then I'm going to do the same thing to the other eye. And bring it onto my eyelid just a bit. And then right down below it as well. All right, so now I am going to take off that powder that was baking under my cheekbone contour. And can you see how that just really cleaned it up and made it look really nice and straight along there? All right, and now the last step of my face makeup is to set it. So I'm going to use a setting spray, and this is the Morphe Continuous Setting Mist. So like it says, it is a mist, and after I spray, I want to keep my face completely, I don't want to smile or make a whole lot of expression, because wherever you do that, and those little lines, your foundation and powders and whatnot will set into those lines, and that's not what you want. So you want to keep your face nice and even. This stuff smells really good. Okay, you guys, this is the end of the face makeup look. If you are interested in seeing how I do my eyeshadow, then go ahead and give me a follow, because I will be posting that video very soon. Thank you for watching. I hope that you learned something new, and I will see you guys next time.